Welcome to the Conservative Edge. I'm Dr. Joe Curry, your host. This show will give you an edge on the truth. It's about substance on each and every issue. Today's issue is a very complicated one and it's a very controversial one. It's called global warming. And we have one of the greatest experts in the country to deal with that issue. His name is Jay Lehr. Dr. Lehr holds an engineering degree from Princeton University. I understand you graduated when you were only 20 years old. Were you running to get out of there?
I was a precocious child.
I see. And a PhD in hydrology and environmental science from the University of Arizona. He's the author, co-author, and editor of 30 books, ranging from nuclear physics, water supply, business management, and believe it or not, physical education or physical fitness, all available on Amazon.com. He taught at the University of Arizona and Ohio State University, was executive director at the Association of Groundwater Scientists and Engineers, and science director at the Heartland Institute. He is currently senior policy analyst for the International Climate Science Coalition. Is that pretty much tells the story, Dr. Lehr?
You need say no more. I think that's a nice brief bio and it says it all.
All right. I will start out by making some statements, and I will not make any conclusive statements whatsoever. This will be up to you to do so. And I will ask a series of questions, and I'll give you time to answer each and every one of them. Are we okay with that?
Absolutely. I look forward to it.
There is so much controversy surrounding the subject. It has reached almost every country. Even a 16-year-old girl from Sweden right now is lecturing us on how irresponsible we have been with the environment. However, every side is claiming monopoly on the scientific evidence. Those on the left will say, oh my God, we are destroying the environment, we are going crazy, and those on the right will say, now wait a second, the facts do not really support your conclusions. Every side has a different set of ideas of how to deal with the problem. Every side has a different idea of what the cost will be. And everybody is, on the left is starting to tell us that we're going to die soon, maybe within 12 years, according to Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. And I can't believe that a woman of this capability is controlling the subject matter. However, is she talking about us dying within 12 years, all of us? Only the Republicans or the people in her district and in Bronx and Queens? Who's going to die? Are we all going to die at the same time? Or is it likely that she's exaggerating the facts? What do you think?
Well, Joe, I wouldn't use the word exaggerating because she's 100% wrong. It is the biggest fraud ever perpetrated on society since man walked on the earth. There is zero scientific evidence to show that the carbon dioxide that we pump into the atmosphere when we drive our automobiles, run power plants, and have factories operating on oil and natural gas. There is no scientific evidence. They gin up mathematical equations saying they simulate the climate of the earth when the climate of the earth is so complex. One of our top scientists, Willie Soon at the Harvard Astrophysics Lab, calculated if we use the largest computer on the planet, it would take it 40 years to reach an answer if we knew all the variables that are involved in the climate. So this is just a silly fraud. And I'm hoping that the public will wake up to the idea that someone's saying the world's going to end in 12 years. It's so absolutely ridiculous when all of their predictions for the last 30 years have gone wrong. I'm actually glad that she is so absurd. I'm glad that we're being lectured by a 16-year-old girl from Sweden who knows nothing about the climate. This will eventually end. It may take a cooling of the earth, which is likely to happen in the next 10 years for people to come to their senses. And yet the left will still try to scare the public with some scam or other so that we rush to the government to have more power and control our lives.
All right, let's do a little history here. The Earth history is about 5 billion years. The ice ages occurred. The first one, I understand, is about 2.5 billion years ago. And we are living in the current ice age. Is that correct so far?
That's correct. We're in an interim, though. We're in an
okay.
intermediate period since the last ice age. It was not that long ago.
Okay. So now, the question here is, in all the previous ice ages, there were no human beings on the face of the earth. Now we have human beings.
Correct.
So, but during that period, there were incredible differences in terms of when they occurred, the intensity of their occurrence, and the spread on time between one ice age and another ice age. So the dynamics of the universe are absolutely remarkable, and there is no way you could have predicted that one ice age will follow another one and exactly one. So this complexity of the earth has been with us for a long time, and now we could talk about it today because there are humans on the face of the earth. Is that pretty much characterize the history of?
It's absolutely very accurate, Joe. And basically what you're summing up here is man has zero to do with the weather, the climate, the temperature, the amount of carbon dioxide. When the dinosaurs walked the earth 600 million years ago, we know absolutely certainly that there were 1,800 parts per million carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We have 900,000 years of ice cores, which tell us how much carbon was in the air on about a 50-year average, what the temperature was, and we actually know that increases in temperature increases in carbon dioxide follow increases in temperature. Most of the carbon dioxide is in the oceans. When the oceans are cold, they hold on to the carbon dioxide. When the earth warms, the carbon dioxide comes out. So what you are summing up is man has zero control on the temperature of this planet. So everything that's going on with this insanity about let's not use fossil fuels because we're pumping too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is absolutely ridiculous.
All right. Just to be clear, an ice age is caused by a long-term drop in temperature accompanied by an extension of the continental ice sheet. So if we say that we are right now hurting the environment, some people will conclude because temperatures are rising and some of the frozen portions of the world are beginning to melt. Is that an inaccurate conclusion?
That is a totally inaccurate conclusion. The Earth is not warming, and the ice, when you measure it all at the Arctic and the Antarctic and Greenland, it is not melting. So all of those comments that you made are totally inaccurate.
All right. I am a professor, as you know, and I do research. I have a PhD from Wharton, so I am trained to do research. So I did some research. I'm not an expert like you in any way on the environmental issues. Some of the reasons, I listed 7 of them here. I will run through them very quickly for why the Earth atmospherics change. Position of the continents. That affects, I suppose, the...
Yes.
Okay. Atmospheric composition, which is the greenhouse effect, right? Volcanic activities. Yep. The Earth's reflectivity. In other words, when the sun hits the Earth, how the Earth reflects the temperature from the sun. The Earth distance from the sun, the distance from the sun. Variations in the solar output, and asteroids' impact. All of these things affect the atmosphere we're living in. But the left only talks about the CO2, which is the greenhouse effect. But all of these factors could change the way we are living and the condition within which we live. Do you agree with that?
They all do change, and you left out a number of major things. Where the Earth is in the solar system, we have an elliptical orbit, and all of the planets in our particular solar system also have an impact on how much radiation is received from the sun. We have cycles that last 11,000 years, 100,000 years. The tilt of the Earth changes over a number of years. All these things change the amount of solar radiation coming from the sun on a continuing basis. It's absolutely ridiculous that we are so think we're so big that we're a part of the entire issue. We're not at all. Do you know the fact that the center of the earth is molten and the crust of the earth is hard and they do not rotate at the same rates? That is a factor. The fact that plates on the bottom of the ocean are moving. You mentioned where the continents are. That is a factor. The simplest thing that you would have to know affects the climate of the earth is clouds. And we don't even understand exactly what the relationship of clouds is to how much solar radiation we retain on the earth. It's just silly how we don't know the relationship between the ocean and the earth. We don't know the effect of vegetation on the earth. And so it's just absurd, stupid that people think that our use of carbon dioxide, which makes up the tiniest amount, carbon dioxide is less than 1% of our atmosphere. Carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas is less than 1% of all the greenhouse gas. It's a joke, but if you have the media saying it over and over again, and you have a public that is not well scientifically trained, you end up in the situation we're at, where people actually believe there's a problem.
Understood. The historic average of the Earth temperature is 22 degrees Celsius, which is about 71 degrees Fahrenheit. Some of the alarmists are talking about if the Earth's temperature goes up by 2 degrees, we will have catastrophic consequences. What do you say to that?
Common sense should tell everybody how absurd it is. I mean, we all go south for vacation rather than north. We understand plenty of climates on the earth that are exactly that hot and warmer, and there is no problem living there. We know climates that are much colder, and man is so intelligent that we can adapt to pretty much any temperature could be thrown at us by the radiation variation of the sun.
Now, as you know, America is hooked on electricity. It's 24/7, 365. It brings us a lot of luxuries. All you have to do is switch the lights on and everything works. And all kinds of progress have been made because electricity is so available. In America, 63% of our electricity comes from fossil fuel, 20% from nuclear energy, and 17% from renewable energy. Now, the guys, what we produce in terms of electricity was 3.9 billion megawatts of electricity are produced in the United States. And the people who are the alarmists are telling us that if we only switch to biofuel, solar energy, wind energy, and battery power, the problem will be solved. What do you think about that?
Well, it can't be done. First of all, in the 14% renewable, I think you said, or 17, the bulk of that is hydropower. Wind and solar that the leftists want the earth to run on is less than 5%. If we did away with fossil fuel, the standard of living in America would go back 150 years. We would have life in the middle of the 19th century, 1850, 1860. It can't be done. There isn't enough land for windmills. There isn't enough land for solar farms. It's an impossibility. But if you try to reduce the amount of fossil fuel along the way, your cost will be huge. The loss of our economy would be huge. It can't be done, but it would destroy the economy of this nation and really any other nation that tries it.
What would you say about a regular transition, say, from fossil fuel to, say, other forms of energy, say biofuel? Would you be in favor of that?
Biofuel is an impossibility. I mean, I know all the numbers on biofuels. You can have biofuel in a laboratory. You can't scale it up to be useful. They tried to use biofuels some years ago during the Obama administration to run a few ships and a few airplanes. It was a total disaster. I mean, the equivalent of a gallon of biofuel in an airplane was over $600 a gallon. So it absolutely is a physical impossibility to run anything on biofuels unless you're talking about some small lab experiment. So all the things that they're saying that we can and should do are impossibilities. We cannot run the world on anything but fossil fuels, with the exception of nuclear. But the same people that oppose fossil fuels, they don't want nuclear as well. I mean, eventually, I would suspect that our country will run on oil and natural gas for another 600 years, would be my estimate. And somewhere around that number of centuries out, the world will convert to nuclear power because you really can't run out of it. There's so much nuclear energy in the crust of the earth. The world will one day run on nuclear energy, but it will be many, many centuries from now. And we could have more nuclear energy now if there weren't the same people that hate fossil fuel, they hate nuclear power too.
Well, as you know very well, Dr. Lair, the French, most of their power comes from nuclear energy, and they haven't had any nuclear disasters since they started the program.
75% of their energy is nuclear. They've never had a problem. They've had no problem with the waste. They heat it up and end up with glass. All the nuclear waste in France is stored under the basement of a not so large building. They just know how to do it. We haven't had any disasters either. Only the Russian Chernobyl was a disaster, and that's a long story, but the people were running an experiment. It was a poorly built plant. They did everything wrong. And even there, people don't realize only 49 people actually died at Chernobyl. But nuclear is the safest, best form of energy for sure.
I know you wrote a book on nuclear energy, so I suppose you've studied this deeper than almost anybody else. By the way, recently I was in that area where Chernobyl is. They asked me if I like to visit. I said, no, thank you. I'm not interested. Global warming is not just about us, about me and you. It's about our neighbors, what our neighbors do. And I checked what the Chinese and the Indians are doing in that regard. And the numbers are not very reassuring, to be very honest with you. I understand that we are on the right track, but the question is, are the Chinese on the right track? Let me give you some data and see what your reaction is. Between 2000 and 2017, India's CO2 emission increased by 140%, and China's by 194%. Now, China alone will add more coal-fired generating capacity than the entire capacity that is coal generated in the United States. This is just in China. India is the biggest importer of US coal, and they're using it intensively and for energy production. China is a signatory to the Paris Accord. And as you know, President Trump pulled us out of the accord on June 1st, 2017. Do you think that was a mistake, number one? And do you think that accord, the Paris Accord, would have taken us to a much better atmospheric conditions?
No, the Paris Accord was a joke in itself. It only actually admits that if everybody, dropped their carbon dioxide outputs to next to nothing, the impact on the temperature of the planet 100 years out would only be a tiny fraction of a degree. I was one who advised the president to pull out of the Paris Accord, so much so that the White House called me an hour before his speech on June 1st to tell me everything was good and he was pulling out. It was going to cost us $3 trillion for which we would get nothing. Now, all the numbers you quoted on China and India are absolutely accurate. But China in the Paris Accord, I'm not sure about India, but China got a free pass for 30 years. China was not asked to reduce their carbon emissions for another 30 years. They were seen as a developing country. But on the other hand, all of the emissions in China and India, they also have no impact on the temperature of the planet. So you might look at them as a bad thing, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much carbon dioxide they pump into the atmosphere. They're going to have no impact on the climate of Earth.
I have looked at as many things as I could look at to see the conditions that people are saying right now. This contributes to climate change, this contributes to climate change, and so on and so forth. I also read the last issue of Time magazine, which was all dedicated to that issue. So I want to run through them and see your reaction. Give me a quick reaction to each one of them because I have quite a few. The first one is the Earth temperature is rising to an alarming level. You already debunked that. You don't agree with that.
That's totally ridiculous. Right. Zero evidence.
I understand. Cattle farming in Brazil alone accounts for 80% of the deforestation of land in the Amazon.
Absolutely false. Since we've increased our carbon dioxide level from 280 parts per million in 1945 to 410, we have more green matter every year along the equator. Deforestation has to do with poor farmers tearing down a few trees to scratch out some food on the land. But on the equator, we have more growth than ever as a result of more carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide, Joe, is plant food. We take in oxygen to live. Plants take in carbon dioxide.
The cattle, or growing cattle, accounts for a large percentage of the methane in the air, CH3. And
Absolutely.
And a lot of people are saying we should really convert to becoming vegetarian, so we'll probably get rid of all the cows. By the way, cows are considered to be a holy animal in India or some parts of India. So are you ready to become vegetarian like I am not?
Well, you mentioned, Joe, that I'm an expert in physical fitness. I'm an Ironman triathlete at the age of 83. I'm tireless as a runner, swimmer, and cyclist. And I can tell you, while there are a few very healthy vegetarians, there are not many of them. It is very difficult to get the 20 essential amino acids that you get out of animal protein from a vegetarian diet. I mean, I have friends that are vegetarians. God love them. But for the public to be healthy on a vegetable diet, it can't be done. And it was never done historically by our ancestors. So it's a terrible idea. And the methane that contributes to the greenhouse gases is inconsequential in any case.
But so you don't think that the Iowa farmers and the ranchers in Iowa should be worried about us converting to vegetarian diet?
No, they should be worried about the trade war with China, but not anybody, not significant numbers going to a vegetarian diet. As you probably know, I'm sure, McDonald's is now making a meatless hamburger. It probably tastes very good, and I suspect it could grow to be 1% of what people buy at McDonald's.
Check. All right. More frequent and more intense hurricanes around Florida threatening the Mississippi Delta. Is that true?
Joe, we know we have all the numbers on weather events, hurricanes, tornadoes, strong storms, and we know for sure that they have not increased over the period that we've increased the amount of carbon dioxide in the air. All of those numbers are fabrications.
I heard on television one day that most of the violent hurricanes, much more violent than anything we have witnessed, were recorded before 1950. Is that true?
That is absolutely true. And you'll also hear about having the hottest years. The hottest years in the United States were all during the teens and the 30s. Probably 80% of all heat records were set during the 1915, 17, 1935 period, not in our recent lifetime.
Rising sea levels, notably in West African countries. That is demonstrably true, no?
No, it's not true at all. The Mariana Islands, a series of 87 islands off the coast of Australia, have actually decreased or increased their land mass because around them the water is down. Our own National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Agency has sea level monitors all over the world. And there's virtually nowhere on planet Earth where we are seeing a sea level rise more than about 8 inches per century. About 8 inches per century has been going on for nearly 1,000 years. So the rise is very small. Sitka, Alaska, the tide gauge shows that the ocean level is going down. So all of the sea level rise stuff is absolutely a fabrication. I was asked to come to New York City and speak to their city council. They wanted to build a seawall around Manhattan Island because of rising sea levels. And I showed them all the numbers, how ridiculous it was. And the oldest sea level measurement in the United States is actually in the metropolitan area of New York. they should certainly be prepared for major storms, which they have on occasion. They don't want water in their subways, but they certainly don't need to build a seawall around Manhattan Island for fear of rising sea levels.
Mexico City is said to be sinking because of drought. They take a lot of water from underground. Is that true or not?
It's absolutely true. Mexico City, to go to the first floor in Mexico City, you have to walk down a stair. And the reason for it is they get their water from groundwater, and the earth that the water comes out of is rather elastic. And so the more water they pump out, they lower the water table, the land subsides. Subsidence goes on all over the world in some areas, but Mexico City is the best example of it. It has nothing whatsoever to do with climate change. It has to do with where they get their water and how much they use.
How about Central California? They're having droughts too, and they're having all kinds of problem in the redistribution of water coming from the Colorado River. What do you think about Central California?
You were in the midst of a 5 or 6 year drought a year or so ago. Finally, the rains came and the drought is over, but you couldn't hold on to the water. In California, you've been taking down your dams, not building new dams. You've not been repairing your dams. You know certainly about the Oroville Dam and the destruction there. The problem in California is they've not had a plan to maintain, to save the water that falls on the state when it does fall on the state. It's been a terrible mismanagement problem, although they are now taking water and putting it into the ground and saving water. So they do a lot of good things in California, understanding that much of it is a desert, but not enough.
There are certain parts of certain countries, especially in India and Africa, where it is so hot that people must stay inside. They cannot literally go to work. Is that an isolated phenomena, or do you think that's a disturbing phenomena?
Well, it's neither isolated, but it is disturbing. I mean, I myself am not a hot weather person. I can't wait for winter. I'm bringing wood out of my forest onto the front porch to get ready to light fires because I love winter. But there are definitely, I've run across the Death Valley. You know about that. And there actually is a marathon across Death Valley, but it's generally around 115 degrees. I wouldn't want to live there, but there are a number of places like that on Earth.
I see. And the fact that these kinds of conditions are causing tremendous level of migration. I understand, for example, the Sahel alone will have a 47% increase in population because people from hot areas are moving to the Sahel, and when they get in there, the economics of the Sahel will be transformed immensely, and a lot of people will be looking for food.
You're correct about that, Joe. The migration of people and the being unprepared economically for the food. But since you raise the Sahel and you raise Africa, you need to know that in the last 30 years, Africa is 24% greener than it was around World War II, around 1950. So the increase in carbon dioxide is increasing the amount of green matter growing all over the world, and particularly in Africa. So the problem you describe, and I won't quarrel with it, is a soluble problem. They're going to have to learn to develop their farming and develop their food supplies for an increasing population.
Understood. It is forecasted that 85 million people in the sub-Saharan Africa will be on the move. And that could create all kinds of dislocations, especially for those living in cities. What do you think about that? The same concern?
Well, I'm not expert in population movements, but if what you say is true, a lot of planning and a lot of development has to be done. But they're not moving because of climate change. They're not moving because things just got warmer. They're really moving because now they're able to move. They're in a position where travel is easier and they see life better in a different area. So there will always be migration. And I mean, we had a problem in our oil areas in North Dakota. Everybody moved in to drill wells and make good money in the oil fields. They didn't have housing, they didn't have roads, they didn't have food. So there'll always be flows of population that have to be accounted for, and sometimes it is difficult to do that.
One last point here is major drop in the fish population in many of the oceans. and that will create, of course, many people rely on fish as their primary source of nutrition. Are you concerned about that?
Oh, absolutely, and you're accurate. There have been declines in fish population. Again, it has nothing to do with climate or weather. It has to do with overfishing. We have not anywhere in the world adequately controlled our fishermen population and controlled the amount of catch that you can take out of a certain body of water. So overfishing has been a problem the world over. A good friend of mine wrote a book about it that was absolutely fabulous, mostly dealing with U.S. fisheries, Maine, and so on. So these are real problems, but they're problems that can be dealt with as long as we properly control the resource, which has generally not been done in many parts of the world.
As a final statement from your side, would you say that everything is okay, we don't need to do anything, or you should say we should be on a path to reduce CO2 emission and maybe all of us driving electric cars or riding bicycles? What do you think?
Well, first of all, let me say, where do you think the power comes from electric cars? How would that help? You just get the power from a power plant somewhere, and you're going to be using fossil fuels to make it. So really, it is not a crisis. We don't need to do anything. We need to educate people. The biggest problem in our country is a lack of scientific understanding, so that we're unable to combat the falsehoods told by the media scaring people. We need to educate them in very simple terms to know that the whole fear of climate change affecting human life is a fraud. And we're wasting a huge amount of money on it. We have so many major problems in society that need to be dealt with, and we're spending it trying to eliminate carbon dioxide in an atmosphere. It's a very sad state of affairs. I'm an optimist. I'm hoping that within the next decade, the fraud will be over and people will realize that they are not damaging our planet.
I appreciate that. Are you suggesting that we should send AOC back to school? Is that...
Well, my understanding is she was an excellent bartender, and I'm hoping when her 2-year term is up, the bar that employed her before will take her back.
Well, I know she studied economics at Boston University, and apparently she hasn't learned much economics. So I wouldn't be too optimistic about even if we send her back to school. In any case, Dr. Laird, you've been a fantastic guest. I appreciate your scientific knowledge, and I look forward to maybe another interview where we could talk about other weighty issues, maybe global fitness. How's that?
That would be delightful, Joe. It's been a pleasure to be with you. Anytime, I'd be happy to join you again.
Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day. This is The Conservative Edge. I'm Dr. Joe Coury.